Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, it is, as always, a pleasure to have you along. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of our community. We have been a little off schedule, as you can see if you saw the live podcast. It's an hour and a half. That takes an enormous amount of work to put together and to upload and everything. So that's why all of the people who are writing me saying, is everything all right? Yes, everything is fine. If there's no podcast, it's only because of the technical effort being put together to make it all happen. The days of me sitting in front of my little Zoom camera in my house during Corona are long gone. But in order to maintain the level of excellence that we try to bring you on the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, sometimes these things are a little more labor intensive. So now we're back in the regular Rabbi Orlofsky studios, and everything is going as should be. So, Mitzvah Hashem, we will be able to keep things flowing at a regular rate, is our hope. I've mentioned many times that the Maharal says that time is a spiral. What does that mean, it's a spiral? Well, it's not a circle, because a circle you keep coming back to the same exact place and you don't go anywhere. With a spiral, you come back to the same place, only on a higher level. So, as we pointed out, when you count Yovel, you don't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21. You're going through the 7-year cycle, but always on a higher level. And the same thing is true by Sfiras HaOmer. The same thing, says Rav Dessler, should be true about every single week of your life, that every Shabbos should be slightly higher than the week before. So therefore, when we come to a moment in time, it's upon us to understand that this is an opportunity that's been given to us. And so we're coming up to Tragedies of Tammuz, which has had significance to the Jewish people for over 3,300 years. Because we came out of Egypt and we traveled for 7 weeks. And we got to Har Sinai. And Moshe Rabbeinu went up the mountain. And we made a miscalculation. We made a mistake. And we thought that the 40th day was the 16th of Tammuz instead of the 17th of Tammuz. And of course, we built the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. And Moshe Rabbeinu came down on the 17th of Tammuz and broke the Luchos. And that set into motion a series of events that have played out throughout history. The Mishnah in Tainus tells us that there are 5 things, 5 tragedies that happened on Tragedies of Tammuz, and 5 on Yom Kippur. These things are not by coincidence or by chance. When the Chacham tell you there were 5 tragedies that took place on Tragedies of Tammuz and 5 on Yom Kippur, it means that there is an inherent connection between those 2 days and the 5 and the 5. So that the luchos that were broken had 5 mitzvahs on one side and 5 mitzvahs on the other side. They make 10. We know that the spheres are 10. We know the Pirkei Avos that goes through 10 expressions created the world, 10 tests of Abraham, 10 plagues in Egypt, 10 times we tested Hashem, 10 generations from Adam to Noach, 10 generations from Noach to Avram. These 10s are all related, right? So the tragedy of the 3 weeks, which takes us from Shavuos Tammuz to Yom Kippur, are 10 tragedies. And they're divided up thematically, Shavuos Tammuz, and thematically by Yom Kippur. So what's the theme? What happened on Tragedies of Tammuz? Historically, the first thing that happened is the luchos were broken. Moshe broke the tablets. The walls of Yerushalayim were breached, broken through, in the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash. Now, there are some discussion on this, whether the first one was on the 17th or not. Some say that it was. Some say that it was earlier, but we put the two of them together. But certainly the Mishnah presents 2 times the walls were broken down. Apos Tammuz burnt the Sefer Torah. Until that point, it was inconceivable to burn a Sefer Torah. Now, the Gemara says, Eish dos, the Sefer Torah is black fire on white fire. It's fire. You shouldn't be able to burn it. It's fire. Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan was wrapped in the Sefer Torah and being burnt. He says, I see the letters going up to Shemayim. The idea of burning a Sefer Torah, this was the first time it was ever done in history, that you were able to burn a Sefer Torah. This new level had been reached. And the fifth thing is that the Korban Tamid ceased. There was a time when we were not able to bring the Korban Tamid. It stopped. So, what do these 5 things have in common? These 5 things have in common breaking. The luchos were broken. The walls of the city were broken. The continuity of the Korban was broken. The protection of the Sefer Torah broke down. Shavuos Tammuz is breaking, and Tisha B'Av is destruction. One Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Har Habayis was plowed like a field, because until that point, it was a bias. When you plow it like a field, it moves from being a house to becoming a field. And Beitar was wiped out and destroyed. So you see that. And of course, the Meraglim came back and said, you're all going to, brought their evil report, and Hashem said, you're all going to die in the Midbar. And that was it. It was the destruction. And in fact, the Gemara in Gittin tells the story of Titus HaRasha, who comes into the Kodesh Kedoshim and sticks a sword into the parochas, and blood comes out. And he says, I killed the God of Israel. And asked the Vilna Gaon, well, how was this Russia able to get this miracle? And the answer is, of course he didn't. The miracle was for us, that he did kill us, says the Gra. We died on Tisha B'Av. And our bones have just been rotting away until there's nothing but dry bones left, so that the Geula is really going to be Tchias HaMesim. An amazing concept. But Shavuos Tammuz, which comes first, is breaking. First, you have to break it in order to destroy it. You have to break it open, break it down. I had a privilege of meeting with somebody who is very concerned about the Pride movement, which is taking place around the world. He says, okay, it's a terrible thing in America, but here in Eretz Yisrael, that the Pride movement is celebrated. The fact that a Pride club got permission to open in Yeshiva University. The fact that there are people who express a solidarity with this. He says this is only going to end in something terrible, because we're breaking down together, and that's what it's all about today. Break down any institution, break down any rule that still exists. Total breakdown. There were people in Eretz Yisrael who hung up flags, celebrating a normal family, Ima, Abba, ve Yiladim. They were forced to take it down. They were fined, threatened with imprisonment. because you're instigating, you're threatening. Why? Because we're asserting that there's something that's normal and real and always has been. They can't tolerate that. You can't tolerate it. So he says, when you break down society, you break down institutions, what ends up happening? So, we like to be positive here. I don't want to be negative. What's the good news? The good news is that the Mishnah in Sota says, how will you know when Mashiach is coming? The young will attack the elders. Children will attack their parents. The ignorant will attack the wise. Everything that we define as society will break down completely. So Baruch Hashem, we're almost there. We've managed to break down everything that it holds together. I've been working for many years on a book. Ostensibly, it was on Chinuch Banim, and it turned into Chinuch Banim and Shalom Bayis, and now it's turned into Life. That's the working title I have now, Life, a User's Guide. And because I realized you can't talk about raising kids unless you talk about marriage, and you can't talk about marriage unless you talk about what life is all about. What are you trying to accomplish? What's the purpose? Yeah. And I started this because I'd written for a number of years, I wrote a chinuch column in the Hamodia, and they wanted to take all the columns and put it out as a book. And I said, a collection of columns is not a book. Having written a column, I can tell you the goal of a column is to reach 2,500 words or 3,000 words or whatever the amount is that they give you. And you just have to keep writing until you fill it in. But it's not necessarily what you want to say. Yeah. There was someone who had a chavrusa with the Chazon Ish. And so he would go over what he didn't share. He says, what'd you do today? He says, I did a Chazon Ish. He said, but if you ever learn the Chazon Ish, he took out all the lumdas. He just states the fact. He says, it took me 4 hours to turn it into a shir. And the Chazon Ish looked at him and said, it took me 6 hours to make it not a shir, so that I could boil it down to its essence. The more people talk, there's no indication that you're saying anything more. Could be you're saying worse. This is, again, as a speaker, yeah. The big problem of people who are not experienced speakers when they're speaking at a simcha, they don't know how to end. They don't know how to say what they want to say and finish it up. So they say what they want to say, and then they keep repeating it over and over and over again because they can't end it. They don't know how to stop. Yeah. The very first time I spoke at the Shmiras Halashon event here in Yerushalayim, where they get thousands of women, and it's one of my favorite events to speak at because if you don't like it, you can't say anything. So that's great. Perfect. How was the evening? It wasn't so good. They took it to Shmiras Halashon. This guy wasn't so good. This guy was boring. Can't do that. So you have to just come back and say, it was wonderful. Anyway, so it was my first time ever there that I was invited to speak. It was only because there was new management. The old management never would have had me. But so they told us speak between 35 and 40 minutes. So the first Rav spoke for an hour, and then the Mashgiach spoke for an hour and 20 minutes, and I spoke for 37 minutes. And everyone said, wow, that was unbelievable. Why was it so short? I said, you're asking the wrong question. I wasn't short. Everybody else was too long. Ask them why they spoke so long. Once heard Rabbi Fran tell a story about this Rav who was giving a drush. He went on for 45 minutes, And afterwards, this guy came up to him and he says, I'm in media. I have this religion program. If you heard my interview with YY, so YY used to work for the BBC. They would give him a 2-minute slot, a 3-minute slot. He says, I would like to take that drasha that you just gave and put it on the radio. He says, I'd be delighted. He says, but it's only a 5-minute slot. Can you sum it up in 5 minutes? He says, yeah. He says, then why didn't you? It's a brilliant observation. You know, the first and only time that I spoke at the Aguda convention, Pesach Krohn said to me, be prepared to run late, you know, because everyone speaks overtime. And I said, why? He says, because people can't believe that they're speaking at the Aguda convention, they just can't stop. I come in time, you know. And in fact, one person who was speaking before me was going on for a very long time. And my mother-in-law was there, and she was talking to somebody. So one behind him said, I don't think you'd appreciate it if people were speaking when your son-in-law was speaking. And she said, when my son-in-law speaks, nobody talks. So what can I say? But anyway, I was once on a panel with two very famous speakers, and we were sitting up front, and I noticed this one fellow was on his computer the whole time, through the first speech, through the second speech. So I said, he's my target audience. If I can get him not to look at his computer. Anyway, I got up, I spoke. I was very good because I put my chiyas into it. How do I know? Because the next night I had my heart attack. So I put all my life into that speech. I almost died. Anyway, I'm watching this guy. He didn't look at his computer once. That's what I was shooting for, you know. But I spoke in Ur Sameach in Toronto at their minyan. They told me to speak in between Kabbalah, Shabbos, and Ma'ariv. I said, how long? They said, between 14 and 18 minutes. So I spoke for 17 minutes, and I went to sit down, and they ran over in a panic, and they said, why'd you speak for so short? I said, okay, I don't know a lot of math, but between 14 and 18 is 17. So I think I fit your instructions. And they said, whenever we tell that to a Rav, it's between 25 and 35 minutes. Because people just keep going, you know? People don't know how to stop. So everything's broken down. You can see people are breaking down everything that exists. So I was saying, I was writing this book on Chinuch Banim. Like I say, just taking a whole bunch of articles together and making a book out of it, that's not a book to my mind, because like I say, you're obligated to keep talking even if you have nothing else to say. Yeah. So I started rewriting it. And I realized, as I looked over the existing works on Chinuch Banim, they weren't going to help me. Because all of Chinuch Banim is predicated on, I am the father, you are the child, and I will tell you what to do and you will listen. That's how I grew up. Nobody ever told their parents no, not twice, you know. You understood. Your parents tell you something and you say, okay. You could mumble under your breath if they weren't watching, but that was about it. Now you tell a kid something and they go, no. You're like, didn't you get the memo? I'm your father, you're the child. I tell you, no, not going to. You can't make them. You can throw me out. I got places to go. You're like, oh my gosh, this is not in the book. Because we're in Yemos Mashiach, everything has broken down. All of society. That's Shavas Tammuz. It's a total breakdown. When Moshe Rabbeinu describes what was happening by the Meraglim, he says, everybody was pushing and shoving. The young were pushing the old were pushing the leaders. Everyone was demanding. There's no Seder. There's no propriety. Someone just said it to me the other day, and I remembered Rabbi Orlofsky spoke about this once. He says, today, the biggest guy in yeshiva is the one who can mevatel everyone. He's nothing. He's nothing. And if you can mevatel everybody, then you're the biggest guy because you're the biggest mevatel there is. Who does this guy think he is? Who does he? That's why people can go into these websites where they go on anonymously and just trash people. That has some kind of value, and people rally to that and break everything down. the United States just celebrated the 4th of July. The 4th of July is an unbelievable thing. What America has done and the chesed that it's done and so many things that it's done is really amazing. And you have all these people trashing the United States. Everyone talks about how terrible the United States is, and then we're terrible because all these people from around the world who are trying to get in, we don't let them in. What do they want to come in for if it's so terrible? Go back where you come from. When Ilan Omar says, I've never seen in Somalia the level of violence that I've seen here in America. In Somalia, it was such a paradise. Why don't you go back? Why sacrifice to live here in America when Somalia is such a wonderful place to live? And everybody trashes, tear it down. You can't have a country if you don't believe in anything. There was a person who wrote a column in Haaretz or one of these papers, and he was unusually frank. He says, the reason that we hate the Haredim so much is because they believe in something and we don't anymore. We don't have anything to believe in. When we believed in the early years, building a state, making doing something, Now a great victory is if we beat Ben and Jerry's. Yay. We got Ben and Jerry's out. We get to keep their ice cream. Can't write it in English anymore, And Ben and Jerry's is free to do what they want, Hamas chocolate chip, neo-Nazi nougat, whatever they decide to do. Nobody cares. But I mean, that's it. That's what we believe in now. Amnon Yitzchak said that on the 50th anniversary of the State of Israel, they did a poll. What is the greatest accomplishment of the State of Israel in 50 years? And the answer was seedless watermelon. We brought seedless watermelon to the world. As Jerry Seinfeld once said, I'd like to meet the scientists who decided to make this their area of study. What are you doing? I'm curing cancer. What are you doing? Oh, I'm working on hardening of the arteries. What are you doing? I'm trying to develop a new mechanical leg for people who don't have a leg. What are you doing? This has to stop. Pooey! That's what I decided to dedicate my life to, He says, yeah, it makes sense. Because on the outside is green, because that's the Zionist dream, but inside it's all red, because they were all communists who found it. And the only problem is these little black spots, these Haredim, if we could just spit them out and get rid of them, then we'll have a true paradise. So what do we have to do? We have to build. Shavuos Tammuz is about breaking. We broke things down. People are breaking things down. The family's falling apart. Kavod Torah is falling apart. Rabbi Moshe Shapiro once said, all the tsaros of our door is all because of a lack of Kavod Torah. And we're breaking down. Everything's been breaking down. Sneas is breaking down. Shmir Shabbos, everything's falling apart. And we have to build. We have to build in our own lives, for ourselves. Make a chazaka in a field. Field's hefka, you want to take possession of it. You just have to build. You either have to break something down or build. It doesn't have to be a lot. Just a little bit. To be chayiv for boneh on Shabbos, building. Just have to fill a little hole. So, as we prepare ourselves, Shavuos Tammuz, to repair Klal Yisrael from all of the breaking that has taken place on thousands of years. And I know people always say, well, if all the great Doros couldn't solve it, how am I going to solve it? And I say, well, someone's got to do it. So who's left? You're waiting for the next generation? You think they'll be more qualified than you are? It's time. We got to make a binyan. We have to build something. We have to build ourselves in our midos. We have to build ourselves in our Torah. We have to build our families. We have to build our friendships. We have to build whatever we can build. And if we do, then Mitzvah Hashem will be Zoicha to, when Tisha B'Av comes around, instead of celebrating a destruction, we could be celebrating a rebirth. Mitzvah Hashem. And that brings us to our question and answer portion of our program. Anonymous asks, how do you know if you are getting a message from Hashem or if it's just nothing? What a brilliant question. It's a brilliant question. Because when a Christian says to me, I feel Yoshka in my heart, and you can't say that I don't, they're right. I can't say that you don't feel that. That doesn't mean it's true. My brother, one year in Purim, he stuck a little scratch-off lottery ticket in all the Shalchmanos. And, someone scratched it off, won $1 million. He called his whole family. They were so excited. They planned how they were going to spend the money. It was just, Then they remembered to call my brother and thank him. And he says, uh-oh, those were joke lottery tickets. I just put them in as a joke. The guy never talked to him again. But until he spoke to my brother, he was sure. He was holding $1 million in his hand. He was sure. He was wrong, but he was sure. They say there's a fine line between genius and insanity. So how do you know if Hashem is sending me a message or if it's just indigestion? You understand? How do you know what it is? So I'm going to give you two answers. One is you have to have a spiritual guide in your life. And I'm pretty sure that if God comes to you in the form of your dog and tells you to go around shooting people, then you're probably son of Sam and you're crazy. And don't do it. Okay? Trust me on this one. The idea is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to send you messages throughout your life. There's no question about it. And you have to decide if I think the message is wrong or I'm afraid of the implications. Somebody wanted me to start a youth organization in England. This was many years ago. A very wealthy fellow. And I really didn't want to go. I liked being here in Israel, and I didn't want to go. He followed me to America. He followed me. He met with me in England. He came into Eretz Yisrael to meet with me, and he kept pushing. So finally, I wanted to scare him off. I said, listen, the budget is going to be tremendous. You're going to need a national office. I need an assistant director. I need an entire office staff. I need printing. I need 50 youth directors that I want to put into all the communities. I need district coordinators. I'm guessing 5 districts, one in the north, one in Manchester, let's say, one in, I think at the time it was Leeds, 3 in London, and all of I went through the money, and he says, yes, I'm prepared to fund all of that. And I want a guarantee of you for 3 years. And I will make sure that at the end of those 3 years, you have a house, your children's tuition payments are paid, you have cleaning help, you have a car, you have an entertainment budget for going out, and at the end you should come back with $50,000 in the bank in addition. And I said, oh. And so I knew I had to go and ask a Shaila, but I really didn't want to. Because I was pretty sure what the Shaila would be. Because when I asked Rabbi Yoshev, the year I got married, I came to Eretz Yisrael, and I was supposed to be going back to NCSY, and I didn't want to go. And I asked Rabbi Yoshev, and he told me I had to go back. So I'm pretty sure if I asked Rabbi Yoshev. And the fellow said to me at the end, remember that if you do this, you will change the face of UK Jewry. Because once you get the youth, everything else changes. So I made the mistake of mentioning it to my good friend Yaakov Ber, who was very close with Rabbi Yoshev, and he says, well, let's go and ask the good rabbi. And he takes me in his car, and he drives me off, and he pushes me to the front of the line. And as I was leaving the house, I told my wife, start packing, because I'm sure we'll have to move to England. He told me not to go, whatever the reasons. Told me not to go. I was very surprised. And Yaakov was asking different questions to make sure that he understood all aspects of the Shaila. He understood. And, but if he tells me to go, I speak many places around the world, and people say, would you ever consider leaving Israel and working here? I said, make me an offer. I was in Sydney, Australia. Somebody said to me, he goes, would you consider moving to Australia? And I said, make me an offer. You can show me there's something I can do here that nobody else can do. I would consider it. And so we talked through different options and different things and that, and he says, I'll get back to you. That was 4 years ago. Anyway, but if someone can tell me this is Ratzon Hashem, I'm ready to go. But the fact that Hashem sends you a message, you have to decide whether or not that's something you want to do or whether it's a challenge. Someone called me up to do a Shabbos. Here in Eretz Yisrael. They were going to pay me money, obviously. When they write my biography, it's going to be called All for the Bucks. But they were going to pay me money, and they explained to me I could do some really good work. But my mother-in-law was in from America, and all the kids were coming for Shabbos. So my wife says, listen, if you feel like you have to go, then go. So I had to weigh, does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want me to go on this Shabbos, or does he want me to stay home to be mechabed my mother-in-law and my family? I decided the latter. And I think that the Shabbaton was there as a test. Towards the end of his life, when my father didn't have long to go, I came into America and I made arrangements to spend Shabbos with my mother and father. And the school offered me to go to a Shabbos, and I said, I can't, I have to be with my parents. And they kept raising the amount of money they were offering me. Yes, Mama. There was a shalshalas there, yeah? And I finally said no. So I told my father, I said, they offered me a lot of money to do this Shabbos, and I gave it up to spend the Shabbos with you. He said, you should have taken the money. That was my dad. Anyway, if I would have taken the money, he goes, you don't spend the Shabbos with me? He was the master of the double message. So when you get a message, you need someone to speak it over with and decide, is this an opportunity or is this a challenge? Yeah. Okay. David Herbsman asks, why by Ashkenazi yeshivish communities is there no emphasis on Masorah of Minhagim, unlike Svardim and Yekis? And I should add Hasidim. Yeah? Svardim. When I was teaching, I had Persians in my class. And one of them said, I'm not allowed to marry anyone. I said, unless they're Persian? No. Unless they're from Tehran? No. Unless they're from the right neighborhood in Tehran. Wow, that's pretty intense. Yeah? Somebody was talking to this German Yid, originally from Frankfurt, and he was doing whatever, and he says, Shulchan Aruch says not like that. And he says, in Frankfurt, I'm in Agima before the Shulchan Aruch. There's no question about it. My nephew married a girl from the German community, and he had to get married under a talus. I think with a wimple, I don't know, but whatever it was, they're very serious. And by the Ashkenazim, not so much. And the reason I think is very, very simple. It's very simple. I may have told this story. Alan King was a comedian, and he says, I was very close to my Zayda. And as I was a little boy, he said to me, whatever you do, don't marry a Galitziana. I said, okay, Zayda. I know what that meant. Anyway, I was going out with this girl in college, and it was getting serious. And I said, I want to bring you home to meet my family. I just have one question. Are you a Galitziana? She says, what's a Galitziana? He says, I don't know. I said, well, I'll go home and ask my grandfather. So he comes back and says, yeah, I'm a Galitziana. He says, now I got a problem. He says, why? He goes, I'll tell you later. So he goes home and he speaks to his Zayda. He says, Zayda, I met a nice girl. She's a nice Jewish girl. She's willing to keep, a kosher home and keep Shabbos. She's willing to this, all kinds of nice things. The only problem is she's a Galitziana. says, absolutely not. He says, but why, Zayda? He says, because Galicianas put raisins in their stuffed cabbage. He says, that's it? He says, that's not enough? Okay, how often do you meet somebody today who's serious about being a Palisha or a Galician? I'm a Palisha. My father came from Vengrov outside of Warsaw. So the only time I assert my Masorah is when there's, before Kriyas Torah, there's two little paragraphs there. One is Minhag Poilin, so I say that one. I don't know if my father did, I don't know if my grandfather did, but I'm a Palisha. Yeah, but what do you meet people today? He's a Palisha. He's a, every town, every little area had their own minhagim. Where do you see that today? So no one understood when the Chavetz Chaim wrote the Mishnah Berurah what he was doing. It was not accepted in Europe. People relied on the Aruch HaShulchan, but this was seen as nishtahin nishtaher. You kept trying to make pshara between all the minhagim. Anyway, after the Holocaust, and we knew the Chavetz Chaim knew about the Holocaust. Elchanan Wasserman says he knew it was coming. The Chazon Ish and Reb Moshe Feinstein pushed very hard for the Mishnah Berurah to become the standard halachic text. And he said, because the Chavetz Chaim saw that there was going to be a churban in Europe, and no one's going to remember what town they come from or what their minhag is or where they come from. And so he wanted to make one minhag for Klal Yisrael that he could bring together all the minhagim. So that's why, is that Hasidim, this is my Hasidus. I follow this Rebbe, this is what we do, this is how we do it. The Yekis, they know, the Germans know that this is the community we come from. Sephardim, no, it wasn't that long ago that they left. They know which country they came from, what their minhagim were, and what they did, and they're very proud of it. The average Ashkenazi doesn't know where they came from. So it's not like being stark on this minhag or that minhag. That's what I really think the real reason is. Dina asked, why do people die? Rabbi Meir, it says, used to write in his Sefer Torah, Vayar Elokim ki tov ma'od, tov maves. Why? What if you never died? What would happen? Life wouldn't have any meaning. As it is, people don't start getting serious about life until their midlife crisis. In their 50s and 60s, they start thinking about what's my life going to be. But when you're in your teens and your 20s, everything's ahead of you. You don't stop to think about it. Death means there's a certain finality. There's an end to the show. So when we used to live for 800-900 years, people used most of that time to become evil. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu kept shortening it until it was enough time that you could accomplish something without feeling like it goes on forever. Anonymous asks, should high school boys learn Daf Yomi? Opinion. It's an opinion. I don't think that should be your equal limud. But unfortunately, I know people who never finish Shas. When I started Daf Yomi 3 cycles ago, it was the first time in my life that I ever made a siyum on a Masechta. Never finished. Now, the first time I described going through Shas, it was like sitting on a train looking out the window. So every now and then you go and have a drink, you take a little nap, you look back out the window again. The dapim were flying by. Second time I got more out of it. The third time, obviously, I'm getting a lot more. But there is a certain value just to seeing Shas that you're like, oh my gosh, I heard of that Gemara. I've seen this concept. Like I say, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it. I'd find one of these recordings, or you could, of course, join the Rabbi Orlofsky Daf Yomi online, and in a relatively short period of time, you can be exposed to Shas. Because when you see all of Shas, it's a different Torah. And when you just see the first 7 blot of 6 Yeshiva Shemesechtes, you really don't get a feeling for the breadth of Torah. Forget about the depth, but the breadth of Torah. So I wouldn't make it an ikr, but considering the amount of time that the average high school kid wastes, if you could definitely take 45 minutes to listen to one of these shiurim on Daf Yomi and go through the daf. That's my opinion. Yosef Alkabes asks, you've mentioned that you go upstairs to the base medrash. Do you have a base medrash in your building? As Rabbi Orlofsky's crazy, this is something we need to know. Yeah, well, it's a painful subject. I did. Rav Chaim Kreisworth lived in my building. He had trouble walking. So when he was in Israel, he would ask to make a minyan by him. And so he made a base medrash in his apartment. And people would go there to daven, and they enjoyed davening there, and they asked, could we keep the minyan going? And the minyan kept going. When he was nifter, his son Reb Dovid was nominally the head, but he didn't come into Eretz Yisrael that often. And it kept going. When he was nifter, so it kept going for a little while. For a while, I say years. But the whole time, they were trying to build a building. And on Lag BaOmer, they finally moved into the new building, and they closed down the base medrash in my building. It has left a hole in my heart. Oh, don't get me wrong. The new shul is very big, and it's nice. It has... But I used to just be able to go into an elevator, go upstairs, sit in the base medrash. I had a dream once upon a time. I was going to sell my apartment in Har Nov. And based on how the prices were, I could have bought myself a piece of land in Ramat Beit Shemesh Gimel and built my own house with the money. I could have put up a pool on the roof, and I could have made my own little base medrash. Maybe not such a small base medrash. Maybe get a minyan. It's always been a dream of mine is to have my own base. I said, if I ever become fabulously wealthy, I'm going to pay 9 people. I'm going to say, your job is that when I text you, you have 15 minutes to get to wherever I am and be my minion. That is my dream. That's what different people, I don't need a Lexus. I just need my people. Here's my minion. But anyway, so yeah, I had that for many years. I don't anymore. So that's the story. I just want to make a personal appeal. Just something to think about. You've got a few months. Here on the Rabbi Orlofsky show, we often have musical guests. We've been zeicha to have Rabbi Fogelgarn and his boys from Australia. We had Ari Goldwag. We had Lenny Solomon. We had, of course, the Waterbury boys. And I realized to this point, we've never had any Hasidic singers. Now, I've always talked about how there's only one Rachman who Yochim Lanu with Sukkos Dovid and Ofolos and how annoying it is. And so one of our Hasidic listeners sent me a copy. He says, by the Hasidim, we have a whole bunch of them. Send me a copy of a different one. So I thought it would be a really nice thing for Chol Moed Sukkos if we made a podcast. Right? Bring down some Hasidic to sing, and if anyone knows how to play an instrument, you know what I mean? And have a little Hasidic, I can't call it a tish because I'm not a Rebbe, but, a little Hasidic, Warmkeit. So if anyone out there is a Chassid or just wants to be, or you could dress like one, and you have any musical ability. I know there's a whole bunch of these little groups out there. I'm not that familiar with it. It would be a great thing if we could get it together and do that. So I'm just throwing that appeal out there for you. You know who I'm talking about. And I know there are a lot of Hasidim who listen to the show. I've met you over the years. So if you're here in Eretz Yisrael, and before Sukkot, you want to make a podcast. So I think it would be a lot of fun. And you'd be doing a public service for the many Litvisher who are part of my audience. Okay, that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com, and you can sponsor an episode. You can write me a letter. You can leave a comment. You could join any of our online shiurim, the Daf Yomi, either one of the two Mesilas Yesharim, and of course the tefillah shir, which is extremely vibrant, getting a lot of wonderful feedback. And we're still in the first bracha. There's no problem. You can join it at any point, because any words that you pick up that'll be meaningful to you, trust me, are worthwhile. And that's it for this time. I'm David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.